Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this first webinar in 2024 organized by the Flexible Learning Association of New Zealand. My name is Christina Höppner, and today we are going to have a chat on AI together with Rob Nelson. And to start us off and center us in our session today, I would like to start with a short karakia so that we settle in this session, have purpose in all that we do, stand tall, be strong, and let us show respect for each other. So, whaia te maturanga kia mararama. Kia whaia takena mahi katoa, tu maya, tu kaha, aroha atu, aroha mai, tato ia tato katoa. So thank you everybody for coming to our session. And we know that artificial intelligence is a still hotly discussed topic in education and in many other areas of our lives. So I was very happy when Rob Nelson, a former FLANS Executive Committee member, contacted me and told me about a conference paper that he and his colleagues had presented last year. And so I was very keen to have him tell us more about the project that they have been working on using ChatGPT as a collaborator, because oftentimes, of course, we know it as a tool. And so today we'll get the chance to look at it from a different perspective. Rob Nelson is a doctor of professional practice Akonga in the College of Work-Based Learning at Otago Polytechnic Te Pūkenga. He is currently completing, and I learned very much in the last stages of the development of a collaborative, holistically integrated projects team-based learning model that is part of his doctorate. His research interests are in collaborative project work and collaborative assessment practices. In his first career, he qualified as a sheet fed printer. So there might also be some opportunity for us to learn a bit more about that if there's time, before he moved into management and eventually also teaching management. Developing management learners is one of his most satisfying things that he has done. And we will, I think, hear of that enthusiasm and that passion from him in our session today that also has some practical components. So please do not be afraid of any of the breakout rooms that we will have later on. You will get the chance to try things out hands-on together with Rob to see what he has been experiencing in his project and what he has also been discovering together with his collaborators. And sessions like these are what the FLANS events team is here to do, that we bring you topics of interest in flexible, open, distance, online, blended, and all of that learning, so that you get the chance to talk with researchers, practitioners, and academics in order to get behind what they might have presented at a conference or might have written also in a paper. So if at any point in time you would like to share what you have worked on outside of the conference, don't want to take away the thunder of the conference that we are having this year, then please do get in touch with us. I will put in a couple of links into the chat once Rob has started, so that you can also share what you're doing and also take sessions like this as an opportunity to engage with others and get feedback, learn what they have been doing, and maybe also engage in a future collaboration. But without further ado, let's hand over to Rob for his session on using ChatGPT as a collaborator.
Christina, thank you so much for that fabulous introduction. I've just turned my own timer on here because I'm so passionate about this. I could still be talking about this probably 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. And I know we all have other things that we have to go away and do today. As Christina said, my background is quite varied. My real passion is collaborative learning and collaborative assessment. And that's off the back of my own first experience doing a collaborative capstone project in 1998, which was kind of scary because I was 37 years old at the time. I'd been a manager in industry, I had staff, I had a seven-figure budget I was responsible for, and suddenly here I was as a student being expected to do stuff that my company owner wouldn't let me do as a manager. And while it was scary as anything, it's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me, and something which has been a passion of mine ever since that point in time. Humans, well, let's put it this way, collaborative humans aren't a natural species, I don't think. At least not just because, we're a chronological adult, so we're expected to behave in chronological adult ways. And I've had lots of experiences over 20 plus years where people don't necessarily do that. So my doctoral research project is in creating a different model of collaborative project-based learning, and collaboratively assessed as well, where the learners will go into teams before they get anywhere near projects. But rather than assuming because they're adults, they know how to behave like adults and they should be able to function in teams, we're actually going to train them quite specifically in how to do that. So that a lot of the things which, in my experience, have happened along the way, some of which are quite frightening in retrospect, hopefully shouldn't happen. Instead of doing, say, 20 different things as part of a qualification and there's a small capstone at the end, the project itself becomes the capstone. So the whole qualification fits inside of one particular project. That team, which is formed at the beginning, goes all the way through, same team, same project. They collaborate on everything. In fact, they're co-designing it with the course facilitator and co-assessing it along the way, because one of the things that I know from having sat on both sides of the teacher's table, if you like, what I see in the classroom is a very carefully choreographed performance that the teams want me to see. They probably see each other for 2 or 3 times as many hours during the week as I do. They see quite a different performance. So my ability to assess their performance fairly is not necessarily as great as theirs. Of course, providing they've been trained how to do it correctly. When it comes to AI, this 18 months ago wasn't even on my radar. In fact, if you'd said to me, Robbie, tell me about what you think AI is all about, I would have said it was probably somewhere between Forbidden Planet and Star Trek. So it really has been quite an eye-opener to me, having to think about, instead of humans collaborating only with humans to work on a project and produce some deliverables, what would it be like if humans were collaborating with AI, not just as a glorified search engine, but as a team member? Effectively no different to what we would have if there's a team of 4 of us, 3 of us are in the office today, and the other one can't come to the office because they're sick. Well, they don't suddenly stop being a team member because they can't physically be present. So we would find other ways electronically, maybe doing things like Zoom calls, to connect with them. So let me share my screen. It's not that one, is it? Where's it gone? That one. Okay, we want to go from there. Come on, that's better. Right, can people see the slides?
Yes, I can see them, Rob. Thank you.
Okay, fabulous. So the last thing, of course, we want to be in is a situation where we're all running around feeling like we're a bit headless, as you can see in the picture here. So we really have 3 possible choices as far as AI is concerned. We can flee from it. We can pretend it's not there. We can hide from it. Well, I'm sorry, but I think that opportunity has long gone now and it's not coming back. We can fight against it because it's going to take some of us quite a long way outside our comfort zones. Mind you, there are some things that we should be fighting against because there are some people who will attempt to use it for naughty purposes. Yeah, even if it's only as simple as, well, I don't feel like doing this work, so if I tell ChatGPT to do it, Chatty will do it for me. And I actually had a bit of an experience with that. The conference paper that today's presentation is based on, last year, I actually asked ChatGPT, would it write me the presentation? I didn't want it to write me the paper because I'd already done that with my co-authors. And it sent me, what does it send me? It sent me the outline of the bullet points that go on a series of slides. So I went back to it and said, no, thank you very much. That's not what I intended. What I wanted you to do was to write me the script. So then it came back and it stopped at the end of slide 8. And I had to go back and very nicely ask it, can you do 9 to 13, please? I really need to see the whole thing. It was very sorry that it stopped halfway through. I ended up not using anything that it wrote because I couldn't close my eyes and hear my voice saying any of those words. But the usefulness for me was it did highlight a couple of points which I thought, yeah, those are really relevant, and those are things that I should bring out as part of the presentation. So it was useful as far as that's concerned. And that was, I guess, really the beginning of my serious thinking about how do we collaborate with this thing in the same way that we might with an actual human. So the challenge comes like this. To engage with it, and we used ChatGPT 3.5 simply because it was free, it was easily available. We could have used ChatGPT 4, and I see ChatGPT 5 is coming up now. And that raises some other issues, which I'll talk about a little bit further down the track. At the moment, where I see us is somewhere between the innovation and early adoption stages of the diffusion of innovation that Rogers created in 1962. That it's scary, but some of us really want to be in that space. We're not quite sure how it's going to work, but we want to be there. We want to be there so we can take the learners on a journey with us, and we want to be further down that path than probably some of them are. But there is still some uncertainty around its optimal use, and hopefully part of what today is going to do will look at what some of those optimal use issues might be. So this was scoped originally for a team of 5 people. We ended up with 3 on the day, and the scenario was this. There was a small suburban service station, which you can see in the picture there. They're at risk of losing their tanks and therefore basically their livelihood because their supplier was saying, you're not selling enough volume, it's not worth us continuing to supply. We've got an owner who wants some suggestions on how to increase the viability of the business because they don't feel like going out of business. And the task was broken down into 3 groups. First of all, we had to form a team. Now, this was something we kind of skipped over a little bit because we only had 3 people. So logically, they were going to form a team all on their own. They had an hour and 45 minutes to carry out the whole task, which was probably a bit of a really big ask because we had 3 people instead of the 5 it was originally planned for, with 15 minutes for a short reflection at the end of it on how did it go. So what did they have to do? They had to produce a project proposal saying, this is what we're going to do, or this is what we plan to do. And they had to present it to me. Now, I was observing them remotely. They were all in Dunedin. I was sitting here in Lower Hutt. So I was observing them remotely as an observer, but also playing the role of the project sponsor. Then they had to do some research and they had to report back on what they'd found, what they thought should happen. And as I say, there was a bit of a reflection opportunity at the end. Now, as part of the team formation, they had to create an identity which reflected who they were and the skills that they brought to the table. and they had to come up with a set of standard operating procedures. I didn't want them to come up with, let's just go to the internet, let's grab a set of standard operating procedures, and let's put our name at the top of the page, and there we are, that's done, right, that took us 30 seconds, now let's move forward. I actually wanted them to bring some things in and to kind of mix them around and see if they could come up with something that they thought was more them. Now, we've got three people sitting in a room, sitting right next to each other. Each one's on their own laptop. They're logged into ChatGPT. The one thing, and I'll point this out now, the one thing which I found really strange, at no point in the hour and 45 minutes did anybody look over anybody else's shoulders. And yet they were interacting with ChatGPT on their own. The only time they actually knew what anybody else had done was when it was sent to the team leader, who'd put it into a Google Doc, which everybody had access to in real time. So it seemed like a big ask, seemed kind of simple. So off they went. And it was really interesting watching them, because to me, they were no different to three humans interacting with a fourth human. We had differing experience levels. We had one person who I would say was quite experienced with using ChatGPT for various tasks, one who was a bit of a novice user, but kind of knew the basic way around it, and one who was almost a complete newbie to it. In other words, I've heard of it, I know it does some stuff, but I'm going to have to learn this. And that really did, I think, make a difference to how they operated, because the most experienced person almost by default became the team leader, and the others almost automatically deferred to them and how they wanted to do things. We didn't have any pre-training. There's no testing to find out, what is everybody's level of knowledge, to make sure that the person who had the least knowledge of how ChatGPT works was brought up to a minimum level that would put them on some kind of par with the other two. In hindsight, that's probably something that we would or should do. Something they really did discover. Instructions matter, or in this case, prompts matter. Because GPT 3.5 isn't particularly intuitive. It will interpret what you've told it to do, and it will back its own interpretation of those words. Sometimes it will come up with something which kind of matches what you want. Other times it will come up with something you're looking at it and thinking, how on earth did you get there? Because that's nothing like what I asked for. So some things would get spat out of the system and pretty much get accepted straight away. Some things might go back 2 or 3 or 4 times, with the prompts engineered a little bit differently each time, until that person got something that they were happy with, and they could then forward that on to the team leader and say, put this into the collective document. Was there conflict? There didn't appear to be a lot of conflict. And this was very different in my experience to working with human teams of learners. What conflict there was seemed to be really quite positive, in that everybody was very polite, not only to each other, but also to the algorithm that they were talking to, because they all knew it's not like a person on the other end who's interpreting stuff and having some thoughts and then typing back to us, same as we would in a conversation. They knew they were talking to an algorithm, and yet they were unfailingly polite to it. Please, thank you. Something I rarely see, even in a human team which has only been going for a very short period of time and has kind of leaped straight past the forming and the storming and the norming. Very, very polite. Now, I don't think that's real. And if you were to say, Robbie, what would a learner get from this in terms of being able to handle a difficult team member, somebody who doesn't turn up on time, or doesn't do what they've been asked to do, didn't ask any questions to clarify what they've been asked to do, doesn't want to do it again now they've been told it's not right. How would you deal with that kind of situation? They weren't getting that because everything was nice. If Chatty did something that somebody was not happy with, the first thing it would do is apologize. I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you wanted. Let me try that again. One thing which really did come through as far as the reflection went at the end is around thinking at the speed of Chat GPT. Clearly, those people who had more experience using it were able to think more quickly. Yes, that has given me what I asked for. I can put that into the document. Or no, that hasn't quite given me what I want. I need to send it back and get it to do it again. No different to the challenge of working with human team members. Maybe you've got somebody in the team who just simply has more knowledge in a particular area which is covered by your project. So naturally, they're going to move through things a lot more quickly than somebody who's still learning that subject knowledge, as well as trying to figure out where are we going with this project. So there is still a bit of a disadvantage with GPT, as same as there is with a human. You can see the output, but you can't see the process that went into creating it. So if you're going to go back and say, that's not what I wanted, I need to correct this, or I need you to correct this, this is what I would want it to look like, you're still in the dark. You're still guessing as to exactly how it's going to go about doing that and whether or not you're going to get it right the first time round, or is it going to have to go back 2 or 3 or 10 different times? Or are you going to say, thanks, let's just scrap that piece of work and let's start again on something else and see whether or not we can get where we need to go traveling by a different route? So some of the thoughts that we had based on our experiences, as I said, it's just a one-time only experience. Training to reduce the divergence of competence ahead of project work really would have paid dividends for the people who had the least experience. It wouldn't have brought them up to the level of the person who had the most experience, but it would have taken them, I guess, outside that zone where they're feeling a little bit, maybe I'm not contributing as much to the team as I should be because I'm not sure how to make this thing do what I want it to do. So then we need to think about, well, how much training is enough and what training would you actually give somebody? Maybe that's a challenge that you give to ChatGPT and say, you need to train somebody who's new to using you to get the best out of you. So what would you do, and see what it comes up with? We also have the issue of which version would we train people to use? GPT 3.5, very, very fast, but not particularly discriminating. GPT 4, slower, more polished. GPT 5, apparently it's going to have human-like comprehension. In other words, it's going to be able to make those intuitive leaps between one idea and another that other people in the team think, wow, I have no idea how you got from idea A to idea B, but I really quite like it. I wish I could think like that. Are we going to train them on all 3 versions? If we've got free versions and paid versions, what do we do if we have team members who can't afford for any reason to work with the paid version? Are we going to leave them behind? You see, ChatGPT hasn't created the inequity between people who can afford to buy the pay version and people who can't, but it has certainly revealed it, and that could create some feelings within the team against somebody who's not up with the play, as it were. Another issue which we found was really quite significant was the issue of, when it comes to capstone course, what are we actually training people to do? Are we training them in project management, or are we training them in people management? Or are we trying to train them in both? Capstone courses, in my experience, it's the bit at the end of the qualification, and it can actually be quite a small bit in terms of the overall size of the qualification. But why do we have to limit that kind of collaborative learning to one project, which goes typically over a whole trimester? Why can't we do a number of projects, smaller projects, so people have more diverse experiences rather than being locked into something which is in the context of one particular project? Because I'm sure we've probably all been part of project teams at some point in time working on something that we are not particularly interested in, but we have to be interested in it because that's part of the price we pay for being in this project team. So why can't we have one project a week? Instead of having one project which runs for 13 weeks, why can't we have 13 projects running for 1 week each? And each one, it could be a bit like pilots learning how to fly in a simulator. Gradually, as they become more experienced, we introduce some more different issues in there that they need to deal with. Because that was a comment which did come through in the reflection at the end of our exercise. We felt that we were really, really slow on this one because we were learning how each other interacted with ChatGPT as much as we were learning how we interact with it. Well, obviously, the more we do this, the more comfortable we become, and the faster we can think, the closer we can get to thinking at the speed of ChatGPT. One thing which was absolutely critical, and we didn't really have the time to do this in our exercise, so perhaps in hindsight we should have allowed a little bit longer for it, and that was the critical thinking. Yes, there must have been some critical thinking going on as each person fired their piece into the collective document, but that was being done on a very individual basis. And it wasn't until we got that whole document together at the end that there was really any critical thinking about how do all of those pieces fit together? Do they make a coherent whole? Another issue which is really quite important for us, if we're working collaboratively, at the moment we are used to assessing humans where they're going to get some marks probably for the things that they've done collaboratively and some marks for the things that they have done individually. But where we have ChatGPT doing a lot of the donkey work in the background, how do we reliably assess how much work Chatty did versus how much work Johnny and Billy and Susie did, and what the relative contributions were? Because we want to avoid the situation where somebody is sitting back and say, well, I told Chatty what to do and it produced something and I was happy with it because it matched what I thought we should have. So therefore it's got to be okay. You can reward me for that because Chatty wouldn't have produced that unless I gave them great instructions in the beginning. A question which really, it puzzles me. How do you have a relationship with an algorithm? You see, when you're working together with human participants, you can go out for coffee. You can go and do things socially which have absolutely nothing to do with the work of the team, but are all about bonding the people in the team so that they have better working relationships with each other. Well, how do you have a relationship with an algorithm? How do you take ChatGPT out for a coffee and really get to know it the same as you would with your humans? Wish I knew the answer. So we've got a couple of breakout challenges for us. How are we doing for time there? Right about where I thought we would be. So we can probably give about 10 to 12 minutes to this. We've got 3 challenges here, 3 rooms, and you'll be automatically assigned, I believe, to one of the 3 rooms. So first of all, how could you use ChatGPT as a team member, so not as a glorified search engine, and integrate that into some of the existing learning activities that you're doing? Second one, would you put boundaries on the roles that ChatGPT could play as a team member? And if so, what would those boundaries be? And why would you put them there? And the third one, there are some potential disadvantages of this thing, quite clearly. Do the potential disadvantages, in your view, outweigh the potential advantages of integrating ChatGPT as a team member, and why? So, Christina, if you're still with us, if you can flick people into the breakout rooms, that would be absolutely fabulous.
Yes, I am still here. So give me a second. I've just also
Excellent.
put the questions into the chat if somebody
Oh,
wants
brilliant.
to have them closer by and or just copy out into a document. Welcome back, everybody. From your breakout rooms, I'll hand over to Rob.
Okay. You can all hear me and see me again? Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. If I could ask one person from each of the 4 rooms to give me what they think of as their most critical point that their group came up with.
I'm happy to go for group 1. We decided to
Thank you,
focus on
Chris.
question 1. How could ChatGPT as a team member be integrated into existing learning activities? And we sort of said it was useful as a sounding board, so to feed ideas into and see what stuck, and what, if any, new ideas came out to then come back around and work on. Also to help summarize and clarify ideas to make it simpler and easier to explain. And then as a collator, so to collate various sources of information and bring it together in a more cohesive package. And really that back and forth sort of iteration approach of feed it something, take it back, discuss that with others, build on it, and refine.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have somebody from room 2?
What room was room 2? Was that us? We'll go. We focused on, I guess number 2, the boundaries and the boundaries that could be set. And we felt that ChatGPT was good for engagement, for breaking inertia. That actually you have to write and you have to ask questions. So at particularly at lower levels, foundation levels, that could be in itself important to get students going. We felt the brainstorming, the freedom to write more formulaic work for in the sciences for students with and faculty with English as a second language. It's been invaluable. However, for more synthesizing kinds of work, such as writing an introduction to a thesis, then that absolutely has to be done by a human. And Belinda used the phrase, a phrase that she uses with her students: has that information gone through your head or just through your keyboard? But that's the nature of our discussion, and the others might want to add more.
Great thinking. Thank you, Jenny. I actually read an article yesterday which suggested something like 200, and these are only the papers which have been picked up so far, papers which have been published, almost completely written by AI, and the dead giveaway, whether it appears in the introduction or anywhere else, is the phrase, according to my latest knowledge update. You see that, you can virtually guarantee that Chatty or one of Chatty's cousins wrote the whole thing. Thanks. Somebody from room 3.
I think we were part of maybe there were 2 room 2s, otherwise take us as room 3. We also talked about the boundaries, and some points were about using it as a planning tool was seen as a really good move. But we also wondered about how we could include a tool to get each team member to say what they used it for and how they used it. We were really clear that it will be important to be within the boundaries of the institution. We thought that such a tool could be a simple, like a Word document, but just everybody reflecting back what was the role it was used for, how it was done. And there was quite a focus being put on a critical approach with the artificial intelligence and being really mindful, reflecting back on what it was used for, how it was used, and what the outcomes were. So that was a lot of emphasis put on that in the discussion, I felt. Is there anything else the others would like to add?
That sounds good. I think that would be a horrible thing if we ever lost the ability to critically think and to reject what Chatty said in the same way we'd reject what a human said if we thought it wasn't quite right. Thanks for that, Bettina. Room 4. Do we have somebody from room 4?
Do you want to talk to it, Aidan?
I didn't do really that much talking.
Yeah, that's why I'm throwing you under the bus.
I suppose to start with, we were chatting about the which question. That was the hardest thing. We just wanted a decision made. But then most of the discussion actually was around the prompting and how well the prompting and I think most of our discussion probably centered around still using it as a tool rather than a team member. But I think it's still really important that prompting around the team member as well. So it still goes, it's getting those prompts right, which is the most important thing, so that you can, I don't know, use it correctly. But similar to what a couple of the others have said as well, we don't want it just going straight through people's fingers. Having people actually thinking, students thinking, using, critiquing, so important. And I could feel it from the room that they were very worried or just worried that students aren't learning. So that's the danger within there. I think that's about what I've written down. So
Yeah, I
add
think you're
anything?
onto something with the prompting, because I can think of any number of real life human project teams that I've worked with where the prompting has been so critical in terms of turning somebody's light bulb on when they've done something that's not quite right, and you give them a slightly different prompt. It's like, that light bulb is now a searchlight. Wow, if I'd known that in the beginning, excuse me, I have to go away and do this now. I know what I'm up to.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, really valuable thinking there. Thank you very much to all 4 rooms. Really appreciate your input there. It's a bit like when I got Chatty to write my conference presentation for me. It's given me some things that I might probably have thought of some of these ideas myself sooner or later, but it's brought them out sooner, which is actually better. So thank you very much. I'll just go back to share screen for a moment. Yeah. So if anybody wants to contact me to follow up on any of the points that we've raised today, I'm more than happy to communicate with you, interact with you in any way that we need to try and progress some of the things that we could possibly do with ChatGPT or its cousins as a team member rather than simply as a tool. So if we have any other questions or feedback, we've probably got a couple of minutes before Christina needs to close us off.
I actually just have a very quick question, Rob.
Yes.
You're calling ChatGPT Chatty. Has that helped in the communication with it?
Yeah, it probably has, and that was actually something that I stole from a ChatGPT person, Alison Vidotto, that I follow from Australia, and she she has named her version of it as Chatty, so I guess I've kind of picked that up from Alison. I call it Chatmate myself, but whatever we call it, I think it does actually help to give it a name and kind of slightly personalize the thing rather than, oh, I'm talking to an algorithm. Hey, algorithm, what do you think about this?
I have one question. Has anyone used it for role playing? To, if an assessment or a learning activity is based around interacting with, another staff
Yeah,
member.
it would be a really useful thing to do that with if you were able to set it up and then let somebody else come in behind you and actually use the thing, because you could then get it to behave much more like real humans who, for no apparent reason, will suddenly do something which is just completely out of character. But hey, you got to deal with this right now. I think there's certainly a lot of scope there to be able to do something like that. Because otherwise, if all you're getting is very nicely, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand, let me have another go, what do you think about this? That's not quite real life.
They don't put into the chat that there are job interview texts out there for role play.
Oh, neat. Thanks, Aidan.
Elaine, go ahead.
Oh, just have a quick question. Thank you, Rob, for your interesting presentation. I've never thought about using it as a collaborative role play team member type of setting. I just wondered, because you mentioned that the prompt, entering the prompts and the prompting for ChatGPT 3.5 especially is quite a crucial skill, yeah. But I wonder, with the more sophisticated versions coming up that are able to hold quite interactive back and forth dialogue, whether that would still be the case, as we become more, as the system become more, as you say, human-like and conversational. Whether the need for
Elaine,
that engineering.
great question there. I wish I'd actually thought of the idea of using it as a collaborator, but I have to give due credit to Sam Mann, my lead mentor at Otago Poly, for actually coming up with the idea and guiding me in that direction. I think when we get into the more sort of upmarket versions of ChatGPT and the fact that it's becoming more intuitive, more human-like, the danger is that we might stop being so critical in how we think about the prompts that we give it and just sort of relax and think, well, it'll make that intuitive leap to where I'm going because I can't quite find the words for it yet, but it will. So I think that would be almost a backward step for us as the humans interacting with it if we got too comfortable with its ability to think for us.
Yeah, I wonder whether that can also be some more conversations, Elaine, because for me right now, it feels like that prompt or the context for the prompt continues to be important to provide to the bot so that it behaves, say, as a mature student or as a high school student or as a young professional and so, because that can't always infer that from the prompt that it is given. And so it doesn't have that context, whereas if we look around the room here, we automatically make some assumptions, we automatically have some stereotypes, we automatically have some biases that inform how we are communicating. And that's, I think, what would still be needed in order for it to be most useful in the context of the current conversation that it is having. While you were all in the breakout room, Rob and I briefly talked about, because this is all about collaborating with ChatGPT, when is the ChatGPT version or a similar version coming out for Teams? So that you don't just sit there typing on your own, but that multiple people are in that stream, and then the bot is just one one part of that one conversation partner in there. But I guess we'll see when that is going to go live, if it goes live. In the meantime, I would like to thank Rob very much for introducing us or reintroducing some of you to the idea of using ChatGPT as collaborator on a project. There are still lots of questions open, I'm pretty sure, especially when we are wanting to use that in an educational context, in an institutional context, where, of course, AI policies and privacy policies and the like will become important, especially when we are then also going into maybe more personal conversations. I mean, looking at the petrol station does not really have a lot of privacy concerns unless we bring up the balance sheet of the owner. However, other conversations might be a bit more critical, where we need to think about, well, is that something that can go back to the United States or that can be used for training future models and so on. So still lots of possibilities for things to discuss. And maybe even at our upcoming FLANS conference in August. You do have the link to it in the chat room. Papers are due, or abstracts are due right around Easter, so on the 31st of March. If you haven't already submitted a presentation or something in a different session format. So we'd love to see you again. And we'd also love to see you again in one of our upcoming FLANS webinars. We have not yet scheduled the one for May, but would like to invite you back. And if you signed up via Humanitix, you might also already follow us there so that you'll get an automatic notification of when our next webinar is happening. So now that we are at the end of the session, let's close with a karakia so that we lift all the restrictions, that the pathways are clear for whatever you have to do now for the rest of your afternoon, and can return to your everyday activities. Kia whakaraia te tapu, kia watea ai te ara, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakahara ai, humie, haumie, huie, taikie.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.